Hello, everybody. My name is Jake Wetzel, and I'm here with Chelsea Medina, and we are here to present our presentation for psychology of sports and exercise. We decided to make a PowerPoint, and our title of our PowerPoint is What Happens to College Athletes When They Are No Longer an Athlete. Um, this was a very interesting topic to me, and I think it was interesting to Chelsea as well because she is currently an athlete. So,
Yes, since being an athlete, I think this topic was really interesting and it gives me an insight to myself. I am a fourth year student athlete and I will be soon leaving my sport. So this kind of gives me a good insight of like what to expect after I leave college and I'm done with college sports.
all right. So yeah, here's our title slide. We have a little picture of an athlete down there. And this is kind of the outline of what we're going to talk about. I chose this picture down here of Livy Dunn because I figured she was an athlete now that most people know due to NIL being out and being able to make money off your name, images, and likeness. So figured she was a good athlete to go with just because she arguably makes the most money out of all college athletes right now. But we wanted to talk about what it takes to be a student athlete and how to balance the being of an athlete and a student. And that includes things like your mental health, your social life, stuff like that. And then we wanted to go into how people like the athletes transition out, which could be injuries, just life, retirement, burnout. There's a lot of things, but those are just four of the points that we're going to talk about. And then we were going to go to, sorry about that. We're going to go to after college, some career choices, the strains of their mental health, career ending injuries, how they can change their physical activity to still be physically fit, and how we can support athletes better. But to be noted, less than 2% of athletes who compete in college end up going pro. That includes leagues here in the United States and around the world because, as we know, there's numerous soccer leagues around the world. There's numerous basketball leagues. We have alumni here that have gone pro as of Callum Hill from the men's golf team. He plays on the European tour, and there's also Jordan Doss who plays professionally in Portugal, who was on the men's basketball team last year. Those are just the two I know off the top of my head. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea, and she's going to take over on what it means to be a student athlete.
So what it takes to be a student athlete, obviously student athletes are not born overnight. And it's not a very easy task. Then most people that transition from high school sports to college sports, sometimes they either are very successful and find the transition easy, or they might find it hard because you do not only have to excel on the field, but you have to excel in the classroom, have good grades while also balancing how going to practice and traveling if you do make the traveling team. Dedication is steady and consistent with student athletes, and usually they are working on their craft daily, monthly, and yearly. They're always trying to do something to improve not only their performance in their sport to do better, to excel, but also, they are getting their grades up and trying to maintain good grades and good standards. Um, it's hard. Student athletes are not only athletes, the other part of their identity is being a student and usually having high academic success in college and universities. Self confidence and self discipline is another thing between these student athletes. These are important characteristics of them. They need to maintain good habits. If they do not contain good habits, it's easy for them to get behind, whether it's in their sport or in the classroom. Next slide. The student athlete life, like I said, there's a balance between being in the classroom and going to practice and continuing things in your sport. It happens from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year. Some student athletes are very busy, and sometimes when you enter a school year, their season begins right away in August and lasts until December, or you have off season and then it begins in the spring. Or for some student athletes, it's all year round. So for those student athletes that it is all year round, it can be very hard to balance these things. It's important to find balance though, because the more balance student athletes find, the easier it can be. And creating plans to balance their studies, practice, and social life can really help. There is no right balance. Every athlete has different balances that is right for them. This balance may work in some scenarios, but in others it might not. It all is a process. Some plans may work, some plans may not. But it's okay to always be changing these plans to adapt to student athletes' lives. And it could change yearly or every day or every week. Next slide. Student life continued. So mental health is a very big factor in student athletes. It's important to be able to have a good mental health, and student athletes have to balance more than the average student. They have to balance their practice time, class time, study time, and their social life. All these combined can create a lot of stress, and it can impact a student's life's mental health negatively if not balanced. It can be really hard if you don't show up to practice, you can get in trouble with your coach, and your performance might be down, or classroom and study time. If you don't put in time for these things, your grades will drop. And your social life, it's you're we are they are college students, and it is important to have the college experience. There is added pressure for student athletes to excel in the sports and classrooms. They are held to a standard that they are able to succeed in both areas. And whether it's in the classroom or in their field, there is pressure for student athletes to be able to excel in both. If they start to get behind, this could overwhelm them and create more stress on their mental health. There's already pressure among student athletes to be able to perform well, to excel in the classroom. And for them too, there's added pressure because they want to see themselves be able to be the best versions of themselves in the classroom and in their sport. So this can be really stressful for their mental health. The athlete can feel moral guilt if they're slacking in any aspect that will affect their progression. For example, eating fast food, missing a day of training, sleeping in, getting behind on homework. These are all examples of what can really weigh down a student athlete's mental health. Next slide. Career ending injuries slash disabilities. Athletes and teams, coaches all share common goals of wanting to win. As the added pressure of winning increases, the effects of this on an athlete can lead to overtraining, stress and feeling overwhelmed, and burnout. In worst case scenarios, this can put the athlete back in their progression. It could stop their goals, or really worst case scenario, their sports career can end early. And these are just examples that are really stressful to student athletes. And whether an athlete acquires or has a disability, these individuals' athletic identity is lower compared to athletes without a disability. A possible explanation for this could be how the media covers disabilities, people that are disabled, for example, the Paralympics. That is a good, example of how these individuals that gain an injury or a disability that puts them out of their sport, how they continue their sport and be able to stay in their athletic um, life as before, just a little bit differently. Next slide, please. Career-ending injuries slash disabilities continued. When athletes acquire a disability or career-ending injury, it can have a major impact on the individual's mental health and change their everyday life. Now, these injuries could be, losing an arm, losing a leg, or something internally that could set these athletes from what they used to be to having to handle this new acquired disability. Um, Everyone handles it differently, depending on the injury and disability. Some people may be really strong and can get over these disabilities and injuries, and they're like, "It's okay. This is just a little bump in the road that, they might have to change the way they used to live their lifestyle, but they know they're going to come back from it. And these types of people are present self as an athlete. They want to focus on their current health and make future goals to continue in the sport that they used to play. So, for example, there's people that used to be swimmers and they could have lost arm or a leg or there's some type of a disability that they have gained, and they're not gonna stop that from achieving their goals, so they just adapt to what their current health is and still reach them. Another example is an athlete as a future self. These individuals believe they eventually can return to sports or they can't. It's about 50-50 for them. They want to, but at the same time, they just want to do it when their health is better. For example, strengthening an injured leg, arm, or getting used to having a prosthetic leg. These types of individuals, they still have the drive, maybe not as much as a present self athlete would be, but they still have a drive to achieve these goals but they want to do it in their own pace and they want to do it when they are in good health. Lastly, a non-athlete narrative. These types of athletes or individuals accept that they'll never be athletes again, or the desire to go back to what they once were is not there. And that's fine. It is completely okay for them to not want to go back to the life they lived as an athlete before or not want to try because every person, as said before, handles their disability and injury differently. And so it's completely fine if non-athlete narratives happen. That's just a chapter in their life that they once lived, and now they're moving on to a different chapter. That's it. Next slide, please. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Jake Wetzel.
All right, so these are some ways that athletes can end up transitioning out of their sport. The first thing is personal life. So, things happen. There's a lot of factors that can happen when they transition out of sports. Graduation is a big one. Usually, athletes will end up graduating. There's obviously the cases of guys that say play basketball and they go one and done and they don't get their graduation right away. But most schools, athletes are there for 4 years. It could be 5 now because of everybody having their COVID year, or it could be 5 because of red shirt. But usually graduation is one of the biggest factors is why athletes end up transitioning out. Another transition could be an unwanted pregnancy, and realistically, this could be for either males or females. I know the males aren't necessarily carrying the baby, but say they would get their significant other pregnant or just someone at random, it doesn't matter at that point. And now they have to financially support this kid that is potentially coming out. So they might not be able to be a student athlete anymore. They might just have to be a student and they might have to pick up a job or something because jobs would most likely interfere with what this athlete wants to do on the field. Used up eligibility is another thing. We see it all the time. I feel like with athletes that they just they're not eligible anymore. They've used up all their years. Right now, we've seen athletes go as long as 6 years because you've got red shirt, you got medical red shirt, and now we're transitioning out of this now almost completely. But there's athletes that still have their COVID years because of COVID-19 coming into play a couple years ago and essentially halting the whole entire world of sports. And another thing is school. Um, it could be too much where your schedule's too much. I know there's I want to say the word, oh, programs. Yes, programs. There's programs such as nursing programs that might be too much for some athletes, and they might not be able to focus on other duties, like doing clinicals and stuff as a nurse, and being able to go to practice and get their work done, and that could lead to bad grades. And bad grades, I mean, you have to stay eligible, and if you're already not a good student coming in, it'll definitely be harder for you to stay as one. Another thing, how they can trans out is just burnout. Burning out is essentially means that they just don't really have that desire to play that sport anymore. Um, I think we've seen it with friends, even kids, where they've played a sport for 13 years and they want nothing to do with it anymore. Um, and when they burn out, some of the factors are either their coach is really controlling and just wants to control almost every aspect of their life, see eye to eye, and that can lead to things like they would be too mentally exhausted, and the sport's just too mentally draining, and they dread every day going to practice, having games, and then that can lead to their accomplishments having less meaning. And realistically, then to them, it's like, why are they doing this? They don't feel as accomplished anymore, and they value their sport less. Now, an athlete's identity is who they are. It essentially is when an individual self-identifies as an athlete, and they look for acknowledgement of that role. I mean, being an athlete, I could say I was an athlete in high school. I never really made it past the college level. So, as Chelsea made it to the college level, but it can give them like I would say a source of self-worth. Would you kind of agree with that?
I think so.
Yeah. So, an athlete's identity is just who they are, and it's what they embrace. They embrace being an athlete. They embrace being on the basketball team, being on the golf team, being on the football team. It's part of their personality. But realistically, being an athlete, it will never go away. It's always going to be a part of you, no matter what level you played at. Even when you hang it up, it's always going to be a part of you, and that sometimes it's harder for other people to hang it up. I chose this image because it's a kid who's hanging up his jersey because it was too much to be an athlete and a student. So he made the tough decision that all athletes at some point have to make in their career, and that's hanging it up. But one thing to remember about it is your sport is what you do, it's not who you are. And now this slide, we're going to discuss a little bit what's the life kind of look like after college sports. So finding aspirations is a really good thing. It Anybody can do this. Playing a rec league, it doesn't have to be your sport. Like you can go join the Tuesday Golf League, go play in a recreational basketball league, whether it's competitive or just a fun league. There's rec soccer leagues. Obviously, football turns to flag football because pads are expensive. So, baseball turns in softball, they turn into slow pitch softball. I mean, that's just those are just some examples of rec leagues, and it kind of can help build that need to compete some more and fuel the drive that athlete still may have when they no longer compete at the collegiate level. And then building lasting relationships is a good thing because you're not always going to be around your teammates. So if you can build lasting relationships outside your team, those can be the people that help you when you don't have anything else to turn to because you're done with your sport now. And they can help you kind of get through the process of transitioning out. The thing is, find something you're passionate about. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be musical instrument. It could be doing a different sport. It could be cooking. It doesn't matter. But if you can find something you're passionate about, it'll keep you busy and it can essentially help you fuel that drive that you once had when you're an athlete to where you're not as focused on what you used to be and you're figuring out how to use that now towards the future. But a really important thing about this is not to forget about your athletic past because being an athlete, even if you're an individual athlete, say you're on the track team, and yes, you're an individual, but you're still competing for group points. Same with cross country, same with golf. You're going for your best individual score, but you combine your scores to try to beat other teams. So you're part of a team, and a lot of employers like people that are have been part of a team, and they will look at college athletes because they're like, hey, you worked as a team for how many years? Clearly, you can work as part of a group on group projects and stuff, and that can give you an edge at times in jobs. And then to the mental strains and health of life after college sports. So one big thing is anxiety. A lot of college athletes suffer anxiety when they're gone because they have a fear of uncertainty about their future plans. Their whole life has been about playing this sport. and putting all their effort in. But now the sport's gone. So what do they do now? Where does their focus tend to lean towards? Especially if you're not a fall athlete, say you're a spring athlete, your season ends and then you graduate. Now what? It could almost feels like you don't have enough time to prepare. And that kind of plays and role within depression because you feel like you lost your identity or motivation because of that sport. And essentially, it's just you're trying to fill that void of depression with something. And then I know I put it twice here, but grief. There's the grief of losing. Every it's just a stage of loss is grief, and everybody grieves in different ways. And then you have the feeling of insecurity. I mean, you're so confident playing your sport, and now you don't have that anymore. So it kind of feels like you lost what you were confident in that you were doing, and now you're trying to find something else. And then the feelings of withdrawal is just you're just feeling the loss of your sport. It's just something natural to feel withdrawal once you lose something. And that brings us on to how physical activity changes. So one way to counteract, I'll go back to things like anxiety and depression and all that type of stuff I just mentioned, the mental health strains, is trying to keep active. Keeping after active after retirement can really help an athlete because it helps them promote an active and healthy lifestyle. It can strengthen if they got a previous injury during it. Say you tore your ACL, you've always had a knee tweak, and now you can actually strengthen it a certain way to where it's not gonna you're not just strengthening it to compete every day, you're more or less now strengthening it to just be able to do everyday life. And then it increases your cognitive function the more you keep active. I know that's something that our Professor Coleman, has mentioned many times. It's something that we've read in our textbook about just keeping active. It just keeps your brain stimulated and it helps decrease stress because you're feeling better about yourself. Healthy, healthy eating habits also can help maintain an athlete's healthy lifestyle because, oh, I accidentally skipped forward. My mistake. Sorry about that. It's just not falling victim to things like coming overweight, because a lot of athletes in their time they build muscle, and continuing. You don't have to continue to build muscle because I know there's some athletes that do play a sport where you don't want to build too much muscle and now they're done, so that's what they're doing. But instead of building muscle at times, you can also just maintain the muscle you already have, so that muscle doesn't turn into fat, and then because fat and muscle, they go hand in hand essentially in weight. So, and it'll give you more energy, prevent you from being overweight. And it's worth noting that the human body is truly incredible in the way it can transform based on the demands that's being placed. For example, when an individual wants to build more muscle by lifting heavy, the body responds by breaking down the muscle tissue, but then recovers to where the muscle can now lift those heavy loads with ease. So, I think that kind of plays into having a healthy lifestyle by just, you don't necessarily have to hit the weights, but just walking every day, just doing something to maintain from not being overweight. And then finally, how we can help support these athletes when their time is done. One a good thing is to I mentioned it before, encourage them to find passions outside of sport, not when they're done, but while they're still playing. I mean, there's many athletes that I see that play sports right now that go out and golf because it's something to do. It's something that they can do when they're retired. You can always develop a love for a new instrument. There's many things that athletes can do. You just have to help them find that passion. What else are they into? Career development and workshops is a good thing. And I actually learned quite a bit about this because this can keep an athlete on track as they transition out, especially someone like a winter athlete. It doesn't matter realistically when, but just keeping them on track with programs that they have to go to just to see where they're at in school and in life. And it can include things like financial planning because I feel like many athletes, this is, I don't know from experience personally, but I feel like many athletes, yes, they go into college and yes, they have to find a way to figure out how to pay for certain things, but they also have certain things paid for them. Like they'll have a lot of meals paid for them when they're on the road, they have free transportation they get for a year, stuff like that. And then helping them build a support network outside of their sport, just so that network is always there when something's going wrong and especially if they can't get a hold of their teammates. And I know I just mentioned it, but working out is also another good thing. If you join a workout group, I know plenty of athletes that I was friends with that made it at the college level that they joined out workout groups, and these workout groups kept them honest. and it kept them in shape, and it keeps them busy, and it helps them make connections. So, with that, here's our list of references here. We have about 17 references that are from scholarly articles we read, and then we have from the 4 pictures we showed, they're all included in this too. I'd like to thank you for listening to us today.
Thank you.